Hello. Welcome everyone. And apologies, I just realized I wasn't muted. So if you heard me like clicking around and typing, my bad. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. So happy to have everyone here on this very spicy, very scary topic. But would it be an Athena webinar if we weren't talking about spicy stuff? I feel like no at this point. I'm super excited to be here with you all. My name is Melanie Naranjo. I head up the people team here at Athena. We're a compliance training company. We do everything from harassment prevention to cybersecurity and hotline and case management. And one of the things that we've realized we really enjoy doing as part of building inclusive and ethical workplaces is helping create spaces and communities for people in the people space. And so that's one of the reasons why we do these webinars. We just want to bring you all out together. And so I always say at the start of these calls, leverage the chat. You will see it is wild. If you are new to the call, be prepared for some conversation. Half the time people they go into their own side tangents, talking about their own issues, connecting with LinkedIn, making new best friends. So pay attention to the comments, be active, make new people friends. That's what we're all about. A couple of a couple of ways that this work for anyone, ways that this works for anyone who's new to one of my webinars is that we make it really interactive. So I will be engaging with the audience. The way it works is I ask you a question, you answer in the comments, and I will call on someone, and Ace, who's working tirelessly in the background, will give you access to unmute yourself at that point. Now, if you don't want to answer, maybe you're washing the dishes, maybe you're driving your car, maybe you, like me, have your dog in your lap and you're like, I can't stop petting him, I can't stop to type and answer. Just put an asterisk next to your response, and then that will be my cue not to call on you. Okay, I don't want the fear of being called on to be a deterrent to your participation. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar topic. I am joined by Lisa Horgan at Littler, who is an employment lawyer. She's amazing. We partner with her. She's the bomb, like genuinely so excited to have her on the call today as we talk about what happens when you have an employee who raises a discrimination claim, who raises a claim of harassment, who, maybe they get a poor performance review and the next day they come and they say, hey, I think retaliation is taking place. What do you do? So with that said, I actually want to go ahead and give it over to Lisa. Lisa, please introduce yourself a little better than I can. Tell us about yourself, how you got into this, and what should the audience know about you?
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for having me, Melanie. It seems I'm really excited to be with you. It seems like you have a really engaged audience, so that's obviously really fun. And as you mentioned, I'm an employment attorney. I am a shareholder, which is basically what Littler calls partners. And I have been an employment attorney for like 15-ish years now. Time flies. And so I started out as like a litigator, meaning that like I handled lawsuits in court. So harassment, discrimination, retaliation, class actions, all that stuff. And then like a couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to take all that experience and really help employers deal with employment issues as they come up. And hopefully prevent those lawsuits from being filed, or if they are filed, make sure they're like in the best position possible to deal with them and defend against them. And so, I advise on all sorts of issues from investigations, obviously, to tricky terminations and discipline and leaves of absence, and sticky exit negotiations and all sorts of stuff. And, like if a lawsuit actually is filed, then I work with my coworkers who are amazing litigators to deal with that. So I really enjoy working directly with companies to help them resolve their issues like as they come up, as opposed to dealing with it after it's all happened. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, preventive approach is definitely the best kind of approach. We're definitely big fans of that at Athena, hence harassment prevention training. Okay, Lisa, I'm so excited. I don't know about you, but anytime we get a lawyer on and you can tell the vibe is the vibe, it's gonna be a good webinar. Everyone in the comments, please give Lisa some love, some hearts, some plus ones. This is gonna be a good webinar. I'm very excited.
Oh, cute. I see all the hearts. Very cute.
Oh, yes, love it. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about the agenda, everyone. We're going to start with a disclaimer because, anytime we talk about a legal topic, you want to do a disclaimer, so we'll do that. Then we'll get into the meat of the topic. We'll talk about employee workplace claims, trends, tricky situations, what to do about it. And I do want to disclaim for everyone here, before I forget, this webinar is not about how to handle an investigation. We have a webinar on that. If you all are curious, let us know, especially in the feedback form that Ace will share at the end of the call. We can share that link with you. We're also going to share follow-up resources, and Lisa's also going to share some follow-up resources on handling investigations at the end when we do our little spotlight. So we'll talk more about that then. This is really talking about the tricky gray situations before the investigation, what you do between someone bringing something to you all the way to, okay, now we're going to do an investigation. That's the heart of this discussion. And then we're going to do a little fun Athena spotlight like always. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end where you all will be able to just pick Lisa's brain, ask all your questions. Reminder to everyone, this is the safe bubble, right? We want to be really respectful. And so, if you see something in a comment that is probably a thing that should not be shared widely. So let's all just, make sure that this is a space where people feel comfortable sharing their questions and their experiences and all of that. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and kick it off with, first of all, the disclaimer. And Lisa, please follow up if I miss anything. You're the lawyer here, so I want to be very clear that this is not legal advice, right? We're having a discussion between an HR professional and an employment attorney, and we are sharing our thoughts and perspectives, and we're answering questions, but in no way should this be seen as legal advice. If you are having a situation that you are actively working through, you should partner with someone who is a legal expert directly. That could be Lisa in a follow-up discussion, right? That could be littler, right? I'm so sorry. I always say littler, but it's littler. I gotta littler. I gotta cut that out in the middle.
It's fine.
Thank you. And so just want to throw that out there. Lisa, did I miss anything?
No, I mean, I think you've covered it all. The only thing I would add or just emphasize is that everything we're talking about today is kind of general. And when it comes to employment law and HR, as y'all know, it's all about the specifics. So the smallest difference in the facts from what we're talking about to your situation could really change how you want to handle things. So my goal today is to highlight things to think about when these issues come up. And then for folks who need advice on specific situations, then I'm happy to assist offline in a privileged, confidential context.
Love it. The privilege is so important. You always got to put that privilege and confidential at the top of the document and everything. Oh my gosh, the lawyer rules. Love it. All right. With that said, let's go ahead and make this a little interactive. Kick it off with one of our classic pulse check questions. For the audience in your comments, and remember, put an asterisk in your response if you don't want me to call on you. Okay. Yes, no. Who here has ever had an employee raise a workplace violation claim? So that could be a claim of retaliation, could be a claim of discrimination, could be harassment. Okay, got a ton of yeses. Ooh, got some no's. You all are very lucky. I'm very impressed. All right, so let's go. Wow, these are just streaming in. I'm happy to give you all this space to finally let it all out. All right, let's go ahead and call on someone who didn't put an asterisk next to their name. I'm gonna do Tammany Fernandez. You did not put an asterisk next to your name. I'm gonna ask you a question, but don't worry, I never ask specifics that are gonna put you in a tough spot. My question to you, Tammany, is when this has happened, okay, and you don't need to give me any specifics of the event itself. If you could unmute yourself and tell us, how do you feel? What goes through your physical body and brain when an employee comes to you and says, hey, I would like to file a report that I think I've been retaliated against, or I think discrimination has taken place. What goes through your mind?
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. Also, can you hear me okay? I am actually out on there's a lot of cars going by.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. I can hear you perfectly, and I'm
Okay,
now
great.
really hoping for birds to be chirping in the background. That'd be such a great help.
Sounds good. And also it's tahini. It's like tahini, but tahini.
Tahini. Love that.
How did it feel? The first thing that came to mind to me was a little betrayed. Just because, I guess I'll speak for myself. I work so hard to provide everyone with a safe work environment and a respectful work environment, and working with managers and getting employee feedback. And so, and knowing that everything was going well and worked as planned, for the employee to then turn around and be like, well, actually, you fired me because of this. It was kind of like, oh man, like I thought we were cool, but clearly not. So yeah, a little betrayed, a little hurt.
Tamini, I want to go ahead and thank you for being so vulnerable and honest and candid here, because I feel like this is, I'm just gonna be straight here. I don't think people talk about this publicly. I think there's like a fear around it. And I want to make sure you don't feel alone, because I think you're not alone. Can we get a +1 in the comments if anybody here, and I won't call on you, I promise, has ever felt this way? They felt betrayed. Like, are you kidding? I went through all these processes. I did all of it. We had all the conversations. I gave you all the openings. I asked you proactively if at any point there was something that you felt like wasn't going right. You never said this until the moment we made a decision. Okay, so Tamini, I don't know if you can see this because you're walking. The comments are giving you a lot of support here, and I just want to flag that you are not alone. Um, Thank you for sharing. Lisa, I want to throw it over to you. As an employment attorney, listening into this, listening into Tamini's response, seeing all the +1s, seeing all the people are saying, yes, I've dealt with something like this at work. Well, like, what goes through your mind? Are you surprised? Are you upset that somebody feels this way? Are you like, me too, sister? Like, what's going through your mind?
I mean, I'm not surprised. Like, you guys are all humans too, right? And part of your job and what you all are trying to do is to create a like safe and respectful workplace. And so obviously, like, it makes total sense to me that like one of your first reactions is one of like, oh no, like either, this potentially happened under my watch and I didn't notice it, like, or like I did all this work and this person doesn't appreciate all of the work that I've put into making sure that the workplace is a safe and respectful place. So that totally makes sense to me. I totally get it.
And so let's dive in a little bit, because I think, when we recognize that, yeah, this is a real feeling that's going on, and I'm sure that it comes in a lot of different varieties. I think the next question is, so how often is this happening? Is this a thing that people are having to struggle with and navigate, most of the time, some of the time, very little of the time? I'm curious to know, as an employment lawyer, what trends are you seeing when it comes to employees raising legal claims in the workplace? Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? Are they getting more complex or nuanced? Are they getting more, to Tamini's point, are they getting in this place where it's sort of, the employer and the employee are at odds? What trends are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, and like I can talk forever, so stop me at any point. But basically, like in terms of employees making internal complaints, I would say that the biggest trend is just an overall increase in the number of them being raised. And I think in some ways that's good. Obviously, like, we have that maybe initial betrayal feeling, but I say that because I don't think that there's actually been an increase in like underlying bad behavior. Obviously that would be bad. I think there's probably the same amount of bad behavior there always has been, or maybe even less. But I think that employees are feeling more empowered to bring concerns forward. And that's good, because that means that companies have an opportunity to actually investigate and take the actions that they need to in order to resolve the issue and prevent future issues, rather than learning about it for the first time when the employee files a lawsuit or sends a demand letter or goes to the EEOC. Like, it's giving you that opportunity to address it.
Okay, so follow-up question here. Why do you think employees are feeling more empowered? And I want to throw in some thoughts before you answer, because
Yeah.
I feel like anytime I have these conversations, I kind of feel like a pressure to like speak for the HR community. But HR community on this call, if you disagree with them about to say, please put your own thoughts in the comments. I'm very curious to learn from you all. I think that sometimes, where our minds go is this is, is it that we're doing a better job of educating people, which would be the best reason? Or is it, is it like a generational thing? Is it people feeding off a toxic culture and now we're like misusing terms and it's not the thing that it really is? Is it that we are actually just have our head in the sand and we are struggling to just admit that we have a problem and we don't want to take that ownership? I say this for the record, not in any way blaming anyone, but as an HR professional who sometimes second guesses myself, sometimes can get a little bit defensive, sometimes is like, I just want to understand what's going on. From your perspective, Lisa, as sort of this neutral third party who gets pulled into these conversations, what what is your, and I know you can't say for a fact, but from your perspective, what would you guess is sort of the underlying reason behind people feeling more empowered to raise complaints?
I mean, I think that there definitely is a component where like you all are doing a good job of informing employees of their options and their rights and how to bring things forward to you. And then I think that there also is kind of like a generational and cultural aspect where like the Me Too movement obviously was huge, right? And I think that resulted in a lot of kind of issues of workplace treatment, like being brought to front of mind. And so I think that that's part of it. And I also think that kind of like Gen Z and younger millennials kind of, growing up and being early in the workforce and like experiencing that Me Too movement happening. And I think that they generally, and I'm an old millennial, are less willing to kind of tolerate attitudes in the workplace that maybe were tolerated in the past. Like in the past, my impression, has been that like it was more common for companies to kind of give a pass to people who were like equal opportunity jerks, like people who are just mean to everybody. And I think that more and more employees are not willing to tolerate that. And so you're seeing more complaints brought forward about people's behavior, whether or not that's just like, bad behavior or whether it's tied to discrimination, harassment, retaliation, etc.
Super helpful. And I think, as we chat and as I look through the comments, I want to make sure that we're providing balance in this conversation. I'm seeing a lot of people, in the comments sort of saying like, you know what, I actually really love that more people are speaking up. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to see people utilizing these rights. Maybe that I personally have felt some type of way, but never felt comfortable to say something. I'm curious to know, Lisa, like as you're looking at trends and you're being partnered in, are you seeing any patterns in so it's a two-part questions. One, are you seeing any patterns in terms of whether or not the majority of employers or HR professionals pulling you in are feeling one way or the other? If so, why? Like what's driving that? And I think the second part, and I'll remind you if you forget afterwards because I'm asking a lot here, but I'm just so curious. I really want to pick your brain. Is what advice would you have for an employer who's coming to this situation? Here you go. Hello, Kat. Who is coming? I warned Lisa about this. I said I have control over my dog who's sitting quietly and well behaved in my lap. The cats, they do what they want. What advice would you have for an employer or HR professional that comes to you and says, Lisa, here's this thing that's come up, and I got to be really honest, I'm like struggling. I'm struggling to have empathy right now because I feel like we did all the right things and I'm feeling a little betrayed. So first part of the question is, are you seeing trends in one or the other? Second is, what advice do you have for somebody who's maybe on one side over the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wouldn't say that I'm really seeing trends. I think it really varies from individual to individual. And also, like, to be frank, I think sometimes by the time they get on the phone with me, they're putting on their like professional HR face and not necessarily like delving into like the emotional complexity of it, which I know is there, but generally people don't want to pay me to talk about that part. So I think, I think that it really like it just depends on the person, but I totally get it from either perspective. Like I can see fully the feeling that, my work isn't being appreciated. But then also I do think that it's important to recognize that, if an employee is bringing something to you, you have done a good job in creating the safe space where the employee feels like they can bring that to you and that something will happen. Because another thing that I see a lot of is employees saying, I never brought this to HR because I thought that nothing would be done about it. And so it really, I think, is a credit to you if employees are bringing issues forward because they're trusting you that you will do something with it.
I think that's so well worded. And I want to like I want to put the HR voice and perspective out there for a second because I just want to acknowledge for you all, and give me a +1 if anybody agrees with this. It's been a tough few years in HR. Like it's been a tough few years. Like our budgets are getting cut after, the pandemic, we were promised all these strategic initiatives and responsibilities. And now suddenly we're a cost-cutting center. We're back to like it's just about cutting, layoffs, performance management. And like we've lost so much. And I just want to acknowledge that like in that atmosphere and environment, it can be really hard at the end of the day after pouring your heart out to have something like this happen and to be like, wait a second, reminder that this is actually a good thing. And also, Lisa, I think that it is important to then come back after you've had a second and say, like, wait a second. This actually means I'm doing a kick-ass job. Like, I know this makes my life harder, but like, how much worse would it be if the person didn't say the thing, or if the person didn't feel comfortable to come to me and they went straight to the EEOC, which like is perfectly their right and like they're welcome to do that, but like didn't trust me enough to have that conversation with me. And like I really like I think I want to acknowledge like, oof, it's probably hard to do. It's probably hard to do. But if and when you're ready to get to that point, it is really helpful to almost like pat yourself on the back and be like, I helped create the environment where this person came up and this is a good thing. So I just have all the love and empathy for all the people community. Now I wanna get a little deeper here and ask like a pretty spicy question. So we were just talking about how great this is, and I really do believe that. Like for the record, it is so much better for your employees to be speaking up than sitting on the thing and not saying a thing. That first of all, it's not great for the employees from a human perspective, but second of all, from like a legal liability perspective, so much worse. Okay. And also I want to dig into like a pretty spicy but nuanced and real thing that I think sometimes happens. I'm not saying this is the majority of times, but it can happen, which is we received a lot of questions, but we always open it up to questions before these webinars, and I always look through them to see what trends are happening, what people are, what's top of mind for people. And one of the questions that came in so many times, Lisa. So this isn't even my question. This is questions from the audience that were anonymous. So many questions came in around this concern that employees are incorrectly using legal terms. So it's not a situation of like, hey, this is a real thing and we're so happy they spoke up. It's literally like, we had another lawyer on a call who gave an example where they were offering kombucha in the office space, and then they stopped offering kombucha, and then the person felt that they were being discriminated against because this is the drink that they like and it's very exclusive behavior, and tied it into, and I don't know the details, but tied it into a cultural sort of thing. And that was a situation where it was like, is this the right use of that term? I'm curious to know, Lisa, from your end, is this a trend that you've seen? If so, what do you think is causing it? And what should HR professionals do in a moment like this where someone, in their moment, in their heart, they really do feel this way? How do you respond to a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think for me, it's something that's kind of always been around because there are some terms used in employment law that have specific legal meanings, but like on their face, it seems like they could mean something else. So like the classic example is hostile work environment. Like I see that one thrown around all the time because I think that, if you're not a lawyer, if you're not like, deeply embedded in employment law, that could encompass anything, involving just like an unpleasant work environment, right? And in reality, it has a very specific legal meaning. It's tied to, your membership in a protected class, like age, race, gender, whatever, or engagement in a protected activity. And so, the employee isn't necessarily talking about like the legal hostile work environment, but I think what's important when you get those sorts of things, when somebody's like throwing around words like retaliation, discrimination, harassment, hostile work environment, all those things, is really focus on like the underlying facts of what the employee is telling you, not how they're characterizing it, because that's what's important. Like whether the employee says that this is, retaliation or a hostile work environment or whatever, doesn't really matter so much as what are the underlying facts of the situation that they're telling you. And that's the part that I would recommend focusing on when employees raise these sorts of like legal buzzwords. I mean, and I think that it's happening for a couple of different reasons. One just being like, as I said, Me Too movement kind of increased awareness of these sorts of issues in the workplace. And then also, sometimes it's true that I think employees think or know that if they throw around these buzzwords, they're going to get, their complaint potentially taken more seriously. And, there's a cynical view on that. But I think that the less cynical view and probably the more real view is that these people are, experiencing something generally that they feel is going very wrong in the workplace, and they want you to pay attention to it. And so, I don't ultimately know that that's a bad thing as long as you're focusing on the underlying facts of what they're saying.
I think that's so helpful to hear you say, like, truly, especially from an employment attorney, because I think to your point, when certain words are used, there can be sort of like a scary trigger sort of set off, and it's immediately sort of like, oh my gosh, do we need to open an investigation, which we'll talk about in a second, but like, oh my gosh, do we need to launch a full scale investigation because these like keywords were used, and now so on and so forth. And what I'm hearing you say is, yes, listen to the words and also focus on the facts and have that guide the
Yep.
conversation. And so we'll get into a little bit more about like how you had that conversation with the employee in the moment, all of that in a little bit. But super helpful. Thank you. I don't know if you can tell, but the comments are really like they're flowing. So thank you. You're providing some gold here. I want to ask, just because this is just like a fun question, we keep this one brief. I think that a part of the joy of joining these calls is just being like feeling seen and validated, and maybe understanding what other people are going through. And so my question to you, Lisa, without sharing any confidential specifics, because we always want to be respectful on these calls, is what are some of the trickiest situations that you've come across being pulled into situations as an employment lawyer? I just feel like we need like a little bit of tea.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I can't share a lot of the details, right? But I think that some of the trickiest situations that I see have to do with like romantic relationships in the workplace. Because and basically like those just so often tend to lead towards harassment complaints, retaliation complaints, after breakups, like I have seen more times than I can count a situation where a manager and an employee are dating, they break up, and it turns into a complaint. And I think that particularly with companies that tend to have less experienced managers, or with kind of workplace cultures that like really encourage everyone to treat each other like peers, that can be, fairly common that there be dating in the workplace. And it seems like a lot of particularly new managers fail to recognize that like no matter how consensual a relationship with a subordinate appears to be from their perspective, like it's quite simple for a subordinate to say later on that they felt pressured due to like the inherent power differences. And so that's just like a situation that's really fraught with risk, and that comes up over and over and over again. So that's one of them. I'll pause there.
Okay. Tea aside, this is phenomenally valuable information, because I think, and I can see it reflected in the comments as well, it's so important to know these trends, because then we can know what things to look out for and what things to preemptively set ourselves up for success on. I will share, just like based on your note, Lisa, for everyone in the comments who's like, "Ooh, I want to make sure we avoid that." We actually have templates, one for how to disclose to HR when you get into a relationship with a colleague, and two, we have a template dating policy that you are more than welcome to pull from. It's free, and we keep it like brief. It's relatable language in classic Athena style. We use emojis in it. We let people know, some emojis in text not appropriate. So if you all are interested, keep an eye out for our follow-up email, because we'll share those templates with you. Lisa, I personally had no idea that that was one of the most common things that comes up. And so everyone listen up, because clearly that's something you need to look out for. Okay, I'm gonna pull it back and be a little interactive for a second here. Okay, we got another pulse question. 1 to 5, 5 being I agree with this statement, 1 being I disagree with this statement. 1 to 5, how much do you agree with the following statement? I've struggled to balance demonstrating empathy while trying to minimize the risk of legal liability in the context of somebody raising an issue. So 5, I really struggle to like figure out what the right balance is between showing them I care, but not wanting to say the wrong thing, and 1 being this piece of cake. Okay, and look at you all remembering with the asterisk. I love it. Okay, interesting. Lisa, you can see the comments. Before I call on anyone, I'm curious to see like what's your take on just looking at the responses, which look to be mostly in the 4s and 5s. Like, does this surprise you? Is this a thing that has come up? Do you get questions about this?
Yeah, no, this doesn't surprise me at all. And also like is, I think, one of those very tricky situations that can come up in investigations, right? Like, as you said, you are trying to balance your empathy as a human being, and often you may know the person who's bringing complaints to you like fairly well, right? And your obligations to the company as potentially as an investigator, but also just in HR, even if you are not yourself going to be the investigator. And so I think that if you're in a role where people may bring concerns like this to you, like it's important to kind of have, phrases, I mean, like phrases and things like that in mind that you can use to help express empathy, but that are not going to kind of get you in hot water. So I'm curious, Melanie, do you have any like phrases like that you use personally?
This comes up all the time, especially because give me a +1 in the comments if you have ever had this as well, where like you've heard like whatever you do, don't say I'm sorry. Like I don't care what you say, but don't say I'm sorry. Like that you can't do that. That's admitting that you agree with them. That's that's culpability. That's life. Okay, just look at them just streaming it. Okay, yeah, it's a lot. So I do tend to avoid that word. And I know that not everyone agrees with that, but it's a thing that I do. I'm putting it out into the world. I think things that I really lean on, and it's interesting. I'd be curious to get your take on this, and I'll still answer the question. It's not a cop out. But like at some point, I'd be interested to get your take on like the reality is you're talking to people on all sides of the equation, right? You're talking to someone making an accusation. You're talking to someone who's being accused. You might be quote unquote friends with both of them. I say quote unquote because it's this really tricky relationship where you're an HR partner, but also a coworker and a friend and all those things. I think terms that I tend to lean on is first, I like to introduce the discussion by saying, by being clear on what my role is. Because I think that tends to like people are confused at the beginning and it helps to build that clarity. Hey, my goal in this conversation is to just understand the situation and get to the bottom of the situation. That I'm not here to take sides. I'm not coming in with an opinion. I am just here to collect as much information as possible to make sure that I can, as to the best of my ability, understand the full scope of what has been raised. The second thing that I really lean on is when someone is having a really emotional moment, regardless of what side they're on, regardless of how that emotion expresses itself, for the record, because I think that I think people express their emotions in different ways, and I don't know that we talk about that enough. Some people will cry, some people will raise their voices, some people are just completely silent and quiet, and you think that some people can take that to mean like, oh, so clearly it's not that big of it, and absolutely that's not the case. That's not an indicator of how they're feeling internally. What I like to acknowledge is one, thank you for sharing this information with me, and I want to share in advance that I'm going to be asking some tough questions that may feel personal. I want to acknowledge that that might be tough, and the reason I am doing it is because I really want to make sure that I'm doing you I'm not doing you a disservice by not asking the questions that need to be asked. And two is, when someone is expressing that they're really struggling, I will say, I can tell, I can tell that this is really hitting you hard and this is really impacting you. And I just want to know that I see you. So I will make statements like that. As opposed to saying I'm sorry, but those are sort of the statements that I lean on. Lisa, I'm curious, like, what's your take as an employment attorney? Are you like Melanie? What have you been doing your whole HR life? You're in the wrong. You should have had this webinar 2 years ago. Like, talk to me. What is it?
No, I mean, and this is not just me like saying this, like that's exactly the sort of stuff that I would say is the right thing to do. It's like acknowledging, you can acknowledge that it's emotionally difficult and hard for someone without, you know, indicating anything about whether you've made any judgment on what's happened here, right? Like whether or not you think that what the employee thinks happened is true or not, you can acknowledge that this is difficult for them. Like this is not a process that the vast majority of people would ever choose to go through for fun, you know? And so I think acknowledging that it's difficult for them, I think thanking for them for their time and for their willingness to bring this forward, you know, expressing your appreciation for the fact that they've done this, like that's all, those are all the right things that you can do to you know, help empathize with an employee while also not saying something that, you know, may come back to bite you later.
Okay, super helpful. I am seeing your comments. If you want a script, I will give you a script. Keep an eye out in your emails. I will work on that today after this webinar, and we will make sure in our resources email to share a script with you on what not to say and what to say to express empathy without taking sides. I didn't realize this is something you all wanted. You got it. Ask and you shall receive. Okay, Lisa, with that said, let's move it along because I want to make sure that we leave just a little bit of time for questions at the end. All, if you want more of this, you want more, Lisa, let us know. We'll maybe make it happen. I don't know. Lisa's a very busy woman, but
Usually people don't want more of the lawyer, but
Lisa, people are loving you, okay? All right, I got a question for you, Lisa. Is a tricky one, okay? The reality is, as we've been talking about, you know, getting one of these legal claims can be so jarring, right? And we're talking about the balance of empathy and legal liability and just like the panic that you feel. And I just want to own it for anyone who's feeling nervous to say this or has ever felt nervous to say this. As an HR professional, I feel panic when someone brings something like this to me. I feel, first of all, empathy for them, like, oh my gosh, whatever is happening, I don't know the situation. I'm not picking sides, but I can tell you're having a strong moment. Oh, empathy, right? And then second is immediate. What are we going to do? Oh gosh. Okay. And so I want to throw out to you, you know, for anyone else who's feeling like, okay, I'm getting relatable, some plus ones. Yeah, I'm not the only one. That makes me feel better. You know, my question to you is, as an employment attorney who's partnered with a lot of people, you know, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen people make so we can maybe tell people what not to do, right? And what are some tips to avoid some of the mistakes that so that we can stop the feeling of like I can't breathe right now.
yeah.
Please share your wisdom with us.
Sure. So I think one of the first mistakes that I see made is leaving an employee hanging while you figure out next steps. Like, and you know, obviously, like you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing next, right? And so sometimes I think people kind of like panic and are paralyzed and are just like, I don't know what to say. Oh my God, you know. And so I think that, you know, like that employee has just done something like very scary for them in all likelihood, right? And like their perception is reality. And so like while you know, may know that like behind the scenes you're working to get stuff done for them and like to investigate and all that sort of stuff, like if they don't know that you're doing something, then in their mind you are not doing something, right? And so I think it's important, like first off, just to let the employee know that like you've received their complaint, you've heard them, and then set like a date certain by which you will be in touch about next steps. And like that doesn't necessarily mean that by that date you have to know exactly what's going to be happening next and next and next. But like if you don't on that date, you can still get in touch with them and be like, hey, here's where we are, and I'll be in touch with you again on this date. But basically just making sure that they always have an idea of like, where are things? Is this still ongoing? Will I be hearing from you again soon? Right. And like, you're not going to be sharing specifics of the investigation with them, but letting them know kind of like general timelines. And I will be in touch with you when this is over. So they're not just like sitting in a black box, you know, wondering like, is anything happening with this? Right. I think that's one of the big ones that I see.
Honestly, I'm so glad that like you highlighted this because I think like I just want to acknowledge again that like, you know, things are really wild on the HR side. Anybody in the HR world knows that like Fire drills happen 24/7. I see this all the time. Even if I go to a conference or an HR retreat, half the people have to leave the panels halfway through because an emergency just came up at work. And so for us, understandably, there's like we've gone into damage control mode. We've gone into like, yes, empathy is there. And also we have to be really honest and realistic that part of our jobs also is to make sure that we are thinking about legal liability and how we are handling this and managing the situation. And so we've gone into work mode. But I think what's really important in your response is remembering there's a person on the other side of this who was probably really scared to say the thing that they said. And we've all felt that before. In fact, can I get a +1 in the comments? If you as an, because I don't think we talk about this enough. If you as an HR person have ever had a thing that you wanted to say that was like a workplace, whether it was a violation or toxic work culture, and you yourself struggled to say a thing, maybe you felt like, who am I going to go to? I'm HR. Do I go to, what if my boss is the issue? Who do I go to, right? Okay, we're seeing a lot of people, plus a bajillion, right? Remember how that felt? And then remember that that is probably how that employee is feeling. And so before you go into all the damage control, I really love your emphasis, Lisa, on like, how do you manage this human being first? How are you there for them? Again, we're not taking sides, but how are you there from that for them and reassuring them that you did the right thing for speaking up? I want to encourage you feeling comfortable coming to me. I want you to know that I take this very seriously and I want to help to the extent that I can make what could be potentially a very horrible situation just the tiniest bit more bearable by at least understanding what next steps to anticipate and walking them through that process. I just think it's so, so important. I think I know we talk a lot about empathy in the world of HR, and sometimes it can be like an overused buzzword, but like I truly think like the true nature of the word of like being able to see someone else's perspective and putting yourself in that other person's shoes is just like the answer to most problems in life.
It really is.
Right. And so to remember, like, oh, that person's probably panicking right now. I know I'm panicking, but like, pause. How do I help them not panic a little bit less? And then I can own my next step. So I really love what you're saying. Okay. So I think I'm trying to figure out because I'm trying to manage time here. I think I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask just one last question here, and then we'll throw it over to Q&A. Well, actually, no, we'll do the quick spotlight and the Q&A. My last question to you is, how do you know? How do you know when this discussion that you're having should go from a little I investigation, like I'm exploring, give me more information, to a capital I investigation? It's time to launch a full-on investigation. And tacked on to that, when is it time to pull in a third party investigate?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, so just to like you were distinguishing capital I investigation, little I investigation. I think of little I investigations as like, we're exploring, this might be a situation that requires like some more HR support, some review, but we're not like in witnesses and documents and reports. We're not there yet. And then in terms of when you go to that capital I, like big formal investigation, there are different ways to think about this, but I tend to think about it in terms of, is there an allegation of a violation of your anti-harassment, your anti-discrimination, or your anti-retaliation policies? That is generally going to pull you into the, big I investigation bucket. There are some very limited circumstances where it's like very, very minor allegations and the employee says that they want to handle it, and you may, in very limited circumstances, might not trigger a full-blown investigation yet, but the majority of the time when there are allegations like that, it's going to. And then also when there's an allegation of a serious violation of some other company policy, if it potentially could result in serious discipline of someone, like suspension, them not receiving like a bonus, termination, then those are the situations where you might get more pulled towards a capital I investigation. And then in terms of a third party, again, it's like one of those things where there's a bunch of different factors that play in, but I can tell you kind of the things that I think about. And that includes like, is the accused someone in the C-suite? Because then it's more likely that the perception will be that HR is not able to conduct a full, like, fair and balanced investigation because they too ultimately report up to the C-suite, right? And is there a conflict of interest in who would normally be conducting an internal investigation? So, like, if the issue comes out of the group, for example, who normally investigates? So, like, if you can have employees within HR complain, you can have employees within legal complain. That makes it more likely that you're going to want to bring in a third party. Other factors include things like, if it's a high risk situation otherwise, like there was a decision made even before this complaint was raised to terminate this employee, but now they've raised this complaint and they're obviously going to think that because they've raised this complaint, now the termination's happening, right? Where that that's not the case, but that's not going to be the employee's perception. So that makes it a higher risk situation where you might want a third party who does investigations for a living to come in and do that investigation. If you don't have internal bandwidth, if you don't have the internal expertise, because you do really need somebody who, has been trained on how to do an investigation if you're going to be conducting a capital I investigation. If there's a reason to believe that this could have bad PR or, adverse, like, public impact for the company, sometimes you want to bring in a third party so you can, be prepared to say, we brought in a neutral third party from outside to review the situation. And I think the final one is obviously if you want to conduct the investigation under privilege, that is a whole other complicated kettle of fish, particularly when we're dealing with remote employees, because privilege is like a state law issue. And so we're talking about an employee in California, an employee in Florida, an employee in Texas. And so that's something that you're going to want to partner with your legal experts, internal or external, to talk about as well in terms of bringing in a third party.
What I really love about your response in particular is like the emphasis on, like, at the end of the day, your job is to do your best possible to run the most thorough and neutral investigation. And like, I truly cannot emphasize that enough, especially because, like, in hard times, in stressful times, it could be, tempting to, like, cut corners, or it could be hard to have empathy and just be like, this is not that serious, we're not gonna, whatever the case may be. It is so, so important to be as thoughtful as possible whenever something like this comes up, and just really do your best to do best by the employee and your company in the long run. That is always going to be the best solution. Thank you so much, Lisa. We are going to head into a very, very quick spotlight, and then we're going to do some Q&A because you got some fun questions that came in from the audience. I'm so excited. Okay, so let's talk Athena for a little bit. Thank you for taking 2 seconds, and then I promise we will have Lisa answer all your burning questions, or as many as we can. Want to talk a little bit about Athena. We, as I mentioned, we're a compliance training provider. We offer harassment prevention training and hotline and case management tools. These are great for being able, one, to very easily and quickly track and document information and employee reports, complaints as they come in, and make sure that you have a good record of proof and audit trail over time around what happened to this information, who handled this information, how many of these complaints came in, and it also allows people to submit reports anonymously if that is the deterrent to bringing something to you. And then, of course, harassment prevention, which we've talked about, prevention being the best avenue, which is, let's make these things not happen. That would be the best. I also, for anyone who's in the California area, just want to remind everyone that there is the new California law coming into play. Workplace violence prevention course is going to be required for everyone in the next, I think it's 2 months. If you haven't gotten your act together, we do offer a very brief 20-minute training. Hit us up. For all registrants for this particular webinar, we are offering a special promotion discount. Keep an eye out for an email where we'll share more details on that. And then, Lisa, I know that you wanted to share a little something on the Littler side of things.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, just so you all know, one of the things that I do recommend that you have in place is an investigation protocol, so that, like, when you get an issue in, you have the next steps of like, okay, here are the people that need to be informed. Here's how we're going to proceed to plan the investigation if we're conducting it in-house, things like that. And so if you all are interested, we do have an internal toolkit that we do charge for, but it's not that much. And it includes things like a document that helps you create your own investigation protocol, interview outline templates, report templates, sample talking points, basically all the sorts of things to kind of help you as you are developing your own investigation system. And then also we do like live trainings for folks who need to be trained on how to conduct investigations. And those can be, 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, depending on how extensive and in-depth you want it to be. And it includes things like actually getting to practice, like how to question a witness. And then you get live feedback on like your technique, which I know can be a little bit scary, but is super helpful. So yeah, those are the sorts of things that we have available as well.
Lovely. All right, all. If anybody was here for SHRM or HRCI credit, here is your time. You've got about 15 seconds. At the same time, Ace, can you put up the poll? Before we answer your questions, we always love if you can answer a few of our questions. That's going to go up at the same time, and then Ace will close that poll after about 10 seconds. All right, all. I feel like that was a sufficiently awkward 10 seconds. I think we can close the poll now. Lovely. I love awkward silences. Okay, let's jump into Q&A. Lisa, we got some juicy ones for you. Okay, well, let's do a quick tactical one first, because I think we can knock that out quickly. Somebody asked, do we need to provide employees the ability to submit incident reports anonymously, or can it be sent to the company's HR email? I know that the violence log will need to omit personal identifying information, but I foresee an anonymous incident report being potentially problematic. Essentially, it's a pretty long one, so I will say essentially, Lisa, what's your perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there's kind of two different categories here, right? I think this person's talking about like the California workplace violence prevention requirements. And so that's a little bit of a separate thing than like a, discrimination, retaliation, harassment complaint. And so I have to tell you, I'm not a workplace violence safety expert, but I have many colleagues who are. So I checked with them on this one, and this is, the law doesn't specifically require that you provide a method for anonymous complaints, but it's one way that you can comply with the law. And if you do offer the ability to report anonymously, then one of the things that you want to make sure that you do in the required training is emphasize that employees who are making anonymous reports should provide enough detail to allow the company to investigate. And if you are thinking about like, how do I want to set up the ability to make anonymous reports, third-party hotlines, like I understand Athena provides, is one great way to do that, because it allows you to follow up with that anonymous person to try to get more information without compromising their anonymity. And then just very quickly on harassment, discrimination, retaliation in that context, the only thing I'll say about, you don't have to provide the ability to complain anonymously in those contexts, but one thing I want to flag is that when it does happen, you still have the obligation to investigate to the best of your ability. And if they happen to raise that through a hotline like Athena's that allow you to, communicate back and forth with them, if you need to get additional information from them, then, and you have the ability to request that information, then you need to do so. It basically would be part of your obligation to conduct a full investigation.
I think that's exactly right. And you're such a good mind reader, and you'd definitely understand the underlying concerns, because the extra pieces of this question were, yeah, I'm worried that they might file something and not give me enough information to pursue it. And so, yeah, plus one, if you go with a hotline tool like Athena's, for example, I'm not saying you have to go with ours. Ours is pretty good. But those tools versus a Google form, an anonymous Google form will give you that problem. A hotline, like a professional hotline tool like ours, for example, right? You can respond back and forth to that person anonymously. So you can still continue and ask questions and give them follow-up without knowing who they are. Okay, so there's that. I can answer this one, just because it's another quick tactical one and we have an answer. Managers are the first line of support, but can also be main sources of issue, i.e. putting their foot in their mouth. +1, I've definitely experienced that. Not at Athena, of course. Tips for training managers on how to reduce risk. So I will say, because again, we're short on time and I want to get through as many as possible. So that you all know, we at Athena have a management training for the law. So it is all the legal things that managers need to know, such as how to respond when someone shares that they are expecting a child, how to respond when someone requests a reasonable accommodation, how to performance management in a way that reduces gendered feedback. So if that is a thing that you are interested in, let us know. But these trainings exist, and that is a great way to train your managers. Okay, question for you, Lisa. Okay, so this is going back to, clearly people really felt this was a spicy one. How can HR professionals go about better educating their employees and mitigating risk long term?
I mean, I think that it really is, it's all about training, right? Like, and it depends on what type of employees you're talking about. So for non-managerial employees, you want to make sure that your training is emphasizing your policies, your reporting processes, your company's commitment to a respectful workplace, your open door policies, because again, you want them to bring these issues to you so that you have an opportunity to address them. In terms of managers, similarly, it's a lot of the same sort of stuff, but emphasizing their role in creating company culture, their increased responsibilities as representatives of the company, and also how to handle it if they become aware of an issue, either that their employees have brought to them or that they witnessed something, right? And then, for those who are looking to develop their HR departments, then, as I mentioned, I really strongly recommend developing investigation protocols and engaging in training to make sure that the folks in your department have the tools that they need to effectively do their jobs.
Okay, Lisa, we're going to squeeze in one last question, and then we're going to end it all. You all have some great questions. We're going to log this. Maybe we do a part 2. I don't know. Okay, so this is a really spicy one. So give like your mic drop take, and then we can do another. We can share more thoughts in another call. Any tips for when performance management leads to discrimination or retaliation complaints?
I mean, I think that it's really, really, really common. Like you just see it all the time, right? And I think that there are different viewpoints on why it happens. There's the cynical one, there's the less cynical one. I think that what I see happen the most often, frankly, is that the employee hasn't been properly performance managed up to that point. Because this often comes up when an employee is surprised by performance management, because they are thinking like, I've never heard this before. Like, so there must be something else going on here, right? And that's often when employees tend to turn to thinking like, oh, is this because of my gender, my age, my race? Is this because I raised a complaint before? And not to say that it's not sometimes what's happening. Like sometimes there is discrimination and harassment and retaliation. But often I also think that this is coming from a place of the previous performance management conversations were not sufficient, and managers need to be better at leading up to those conversations and that, more serious performance management.
So this has been amazing. I don't know if you can tell from the comments, but people have really enjoyed this call. I really can't thank you enough for your time, and I hope to partner again soon. Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and keep an eye out for that email where we will be sharing those follow-up resources. All right. Thank you all. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.